Hi everyone, and welcome to the very first ExchangeWireTV episode of the MadTech podcast. I'm Grainne Reid, ExchangeWire's Head of Marketing, and your host for today. Joining me, we have John Still, Head of Content at ExchangeWire. Hi John, how are you?
Hey G, thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited about today's episode.
Yeah, me too. Alongside John, we've got Mat Broughton, Research Lead at ExchangeWire. How are you, Matt?
I'm very well, very excited to be here as well.
Excellent. Well, in this episode, we're going to take a look back at Q1 and dive into some of the key stories that happened to shape the industry, from M&A deals to legal and regulatory updates, and of course, the ongoing wrangling in AI and social media. So first off, let's dive into the key M&A deals from Q1. Kevel, a leader in API-based retail media ad-serving technology, had acquired Nexta, an automated advertising self-serve platform. T-Mobile expanded its AdTech portfolio with the acquisition of UK-based firm Bliss and Vistar Media, known for its digital out-of-home advertising solution. Equitive, the global independent AdTech company, announced its merger with ShareThrough, a major independent omnichannel ad exchange. Publicis Group has acquired Lotame, the world's leading independent identity solution, with the deal expected to close early in the second quarter of 2025. With those acquisitions, Matt, what does this activity reveal about the current state of competition in the AdTech sector?
I think it shows that the industry's in a very healthy state. And I think particularly in terms of the variety of acquisitions we've seen those, consolidation plays trying to reinforce a position within the market, such as the Nexta and Kevel acquisition. And then obviously we've got the more transformative plays. I'm really interested with what T-Mobile is doing in the space with its acquisitions of Bliss. It's interesting to see the telecoms firms who have had a bit of a checkered history in terms of their relationship with the ad tech industry. They've clearly seen there are challenges there, but we're able to overcome them now and take a step back into that market. And also, in terms of the acquisitions, it's not as if it's a case of, what we've seen in the gaming industry where we've had really small firms, startups, which haven't even released a product yet, get millions and millions and millions of dollars of funding. These are proven businesses with proven profitability, and they're getting acquired, and it shows that there's a healthy interest and investment market within the industry.
Yeah, no, it's definitely exciting, and they're quite big deals for all of those ones that we highlighted. John, what are your thoughts on these?
Yeah, it's exciting to see the sector up and running again. We had a quiet couple of years, 2022, 2023, in terms of the M&A situation, and back end of last year and the start of this year has been super healthy and the deals have been huge. I am delighted to see the focus on the European ad tech market. I think the Kevel Nexta deal was huge. We had James on the podcast talking about it. James Avery from Kevel came to chat about the buy. And it's nice to see the innovation happening in Europe being noticed and really appreciated by the companies stateside as well. So, yeah, as Matt said, it's healthy and really, really good to see. And companies are absolutely recognising the importance of data and signal, and that is, it's seeing more of the small innovative companies in the area being picked up.
Yeah. And do you think these mergers and acquisitions are solving existing challenges in the industry, or could they be creating new ones?
I think they are aimed at solving for certain. I think, as I mentioned before, the importance of the data play. We're seeing the telcos move into it. We're seeing Publicis adding to Epsilon that they already had with Lotame. And I think they know the importance of data distribution and how that's impacting everything going forward in the cookieless world, or supposedly cookieless world that's developed. So it is an attempt to solve the challenges at the moment, I think.
Are you in the same mindset?
Yeah, I'd completely agree. I don't think there's any real challenges created by these acquisitions. It's not as if, like we've seen where in the past that we've had obviously seen the likes of Google coming in and seizing one of the biggest players within the market and creating a monopoly. No one's really trying to carve that monopoly point of view, so I don't see that challenge in these acquisitions. Like I said earlier, I think it's just players trying to consolidate and new players trying to come into the ad tech market, all of which is a very healthy thing, and I don't think at this point creates any issues. Obviously, I'm sure 10 years down the line, if T-Mobile has a massive monopoly in the ad tech space, I'll shut my gob. But yeah, I don't see that being the case.
I think it's as much as anything, it's an arms race. It's a data arms race that's going on. We're seeing some mergers consolidating the agency landscape. The huge Omnicom IPG deal created the biggest player in the world, and publicists are now arming themselves accordingly to make smart, innovative moves. And it's that's the way to frame it. Perhaps is that this is the beginning of not the beginning, but the nascence of an ad tech arms race because of the importance of the data players at the moment.
Yeah, and I think you've definitely touched upon it around innovation. But what do you think this means now for these companies and the arms race that they're in? Do we see more acquisitions from these companies, or do you think competition's going to come up and make equivalent acquisitions on their side?
The competition will get fierce. It'll continue to get fiercer. And as Matt said, we could be shut down very, very quickly as 5 major players turns into 4, turns into 3 through purchasing and consolidation, much like we saw in the record industry in the 80s and 90s. But there's, we're also talking about fragmentation in the landscape at the same time. So it's interesting to see how the players will evolve and what the purchase market, particularly from the large holdcos, looks like, and the merger and acquisition market. I don't think it will become that 2 major players fighting off against each other. I don't think we're going down that landscape. I think people are just equipping themselves for a more competitive landscape.
Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I don't really see any of the players doing a massive roll-up strategy where they acquire each and every company involved in a particular space. I think they're acquiring companies and are really trying to fit them in to the particular narrative, whether it's either that growth and consolidation or entry into the market. I think they're going to wait and see in terms of the results on their bottom line and go, actually, has this acquisition been worth it for our company? Because we're still not in the kind of COVID era, post-COVID era of there's loads of free capital going around. We can acquire any single company we want for a ridiculous sum. There still needs to be caution, and I think that's what the companies are going to do. They're still going to be cautious. They're going to wait and see what the results are and go from there rather than let's get the checkbook out, let's buy another.
Yeah, no, definitely. They look like they're very strategic and measured moves. So it'll be very exciting to see what happens for all of them and what else is down the line in terms of mergers and acquisitions. Yeah. Let's move on to legal and regulations. So the AdTech sector continues to dominate headlines, remaining at the centre of regulatory action across Europe. Lawsuits are also making waves, with some major players like Google and Elon Musk's X facing significant legal challenges that could reshape the industry. The DOJ's latest filing called for Google to divest Chrome to prevent anti-competition practices and self-preferencing. It prohibits exclusive agreements, bundling, and paying for default search status, aiming to promote fair competition in the search markets. Do we think Google will be forced to actually divest Chrome? And what do you think the pros and cons are of this? Matt, let's go to you.
I think it's extremely interesting that the DOJ under the new Trump administration is still pushing for that Chrome divestment. Most people expected, okay, obviously with the whole US national security narrative, that approach will be softened a bit, but they're still going, at least on paper, for that divestment. Will it actually happen in practice? I'm not 100% sure. And even if it did, I think Google would retain at least some element of control, probably again, in terms of that national security narrative. But yeah, it's extremely interesting. And I think in terms of what they're going to be forced to do, definitely in terms of the contracts it had with the likes of Apple, in terms of the preferencing, they're definitely out the window. And I think they put the Chrome divestment on the table to essentially be like, if you don't do that, then you have to get rid of Chrome. But yeah, obviously we're all still waiting on tenterhooks for the results of the other antitrust case, obviously the one affecting AdTech itself. And I think that's where we're much more likely to see significant divestments. I think this is, in terms of this case, it's a bit more of a threat that's on the table. but in actuality, it's not going to be as dramatic as that.
John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's I'd like to see it forced, but a couple of issues with it is I don't know who could buy it. Like who could buy Chrome? I know the players that have the funds to do it there's probably 3 companies that could genuinely have the funds to purchase Chrome. I mean, it would have massive benefits for a company like Meta to purchase it, who have been sounded out by some critics as a potential purchaser. But yeah, I mean, the who's one thing, the whether it'll be forced, I suppose, is the question here. And probably not. I think, as Matt mentioned, I think the devil's in the detail here, and ultimately it's the deals that they do that are going to be the ones that are cancelled and banned and wound down. But Chrome itself, I don't see being divested. I know Kieran, our founder, has several lobster bets on with friend of the pod Rob Webster regarding whether Chrome will be divested this year. But no, I think, as Matt said, devil's in the details. It's the other stuff that's bigger. Chrome, the divestment is a threat. Ultimately, there are too few buyers out there and available to actually make the purchase. But I think there will certainly be hits from the DOJ on Google.
Yeah, I guess if we were to look at the divestiture of Chrome, how could the divestiture of Chrome influence the competitive landscape? And does this signal a new era?
After you, Matt.
I think it would be, obviously, it's incredibly interesting to see how that plays out on the US side of things. Obviously, we've had European regulators be a bit more strict in terms of antitrust forced divestments. If the US was to get into that game, despite the Trump administration, I think it would create a massively different competitive landscape. I think if Google were forced to divest Chrome, it would, in terms of the AdTech industry, it's a case of, obviously, there's the privacy sandbox controls which are moving in towards the Chrome browser, but they're under investigation in and of themselves because of how much control Google retains of that. So that basically throws those up even more in the air. I think it would have big implications there. But equally, where everyone's so uncertain at the moment, there's massive implications going on right now, and it's still a case of what's going to happen, obviously, in terms of its consent notice and things like that. So it's up in the air, but in a way, it already is.
John, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I probably preempted your question in terms of who could buy it being a huge question. I think, we're looking at Google being classed as a monopoly by the DOJ. That ruling was made last year, and if anyone who had the means to buy Chrome bought it, then they just have another monopoly case on their hands fairly swiftly, I imagine, and would be forcing another company to divest the browser. Flipping back to your last question, sorry, I think another thing in terms of whether it will be sold is whether Google is seeing where the weather's blowing in terms of search, in terms of AI and AI overviews, Perplexity, ChatGPT, how search is becoming far less of a links-based situation and more of a question and answer setup through AI, and whether they think that Chrome is actually a worthwhile divestment and a sacrificial lamb they can make in order to get a foothold further in using Gemini for their AI game. It could be interesting as to whether they think Chrome's had its day. So that may affect the divestment and whether this is a willing sacrifice from Google. But yeah, also in the regulatory side of it, a purchase of Chrome would create another monopoly over the search market instantly at the moment. So again, not sure who would buy it.
Yeah, let's see how that one plays out.
Yeah.
Moving on to X. Elon Musk's X is suing major advertisers and the WFA, claiming they orchestrated an illegal advertising boycott after his 2022 acquisition. The lawsuit alleges this action cost X billions and unfairly imposed uniform brand safety standards, with new defendants added like Lego, Nestle and Shell. It raises concerns over antitrust laws, brand safety and social media platforms' autonomy. How does X claims of an illegal advertising boycott challenge existing antitrust laws, and could this case redefine how collective action by advertisers is regulated? John?
I'll let Matt be the reasonable answer here because I am baffled by the existence of this case. I will get on to Elon later for a later question, I know, but I think the fact that they're attempting, like Elon Musk and Linda Yaccarino are attempting to get advertisers to advertise with them by force is it's bizarre that this case has even been brought. You can't sit talking on a panel telling advertisers to go fuck themselves and then come back and say, actually spend all your money with me. It's not fair. Oh no, it's not fair. You're not spending money on my $44 billion platform that I've purchased for myself. Oh God, I can be as rude as I like. I can promote all the content I want for free speech, but you are not free to take your money elsewhere. You must spend it with me. I am baffled by the man and his actions. I am saddened deeply by his purchase of Twitter, which was a wonderful place for everyone to get information, for journalists, for fun. And it's become a swamp and willfully by him. I will get on more later because he is my pet hate. So Matt, be reasonable, please, because I lose all rationality when it comes to this guy.
You say I'm the voice of reason. The very first word in my notes is batshit, and that's just what I think of this lawsuit. And to come back to your question, Ronnie, it just goes so far beyond what's reasonably covered in antitrust laws. It's just strong-arming at its finest. It's not that these advertisers were colluding to withdraw their ad spend from Twitter when he made it. He carved away the vital brand safety controls of that platform and turned it into a place where you can easily log on and see the most vile, hateful, hurtful, racist content. And you can't expect advertisers to spend there, and you can't force them to spend their ad dollars where they don't choose to. Obviously, if this legal case was to go through and X were to win, then happy days at ExchangeWire Towers, because we could have Coca-Cola and Unilever adverts plastered all over our homepage, because by that logic, we could force them to spend on ExchangeWire when they wouldn't necessarily want to or need to or traditionally have done. So yeah, not so much voice of reason.
No, that was far more reasonable and well measured than my answer, but you're dead on. They stripped it to the bone. There were the images of Elon when he bought Twitter, turned it into X, walking in with a kitchen sink because he's just in it for the lols. And he has taken his 4chan troll outlook and turned it into 44 billion chan. And there is no brand safety. If I was any major brand, I would be thoroughly ready to fight the case that they do not have to advertise there. And in the first quarter of this year, we've seen reports from X itself saying the advertisers are slowly coming back to X, and Linda Yaccarino's glad handing and saying that people are coming back, all while they are trying to make them come back by force. It's like advertisers need to take a long, hard look at themselves if they are on that platform. It's on them that it can still function. But the court case, Matt, dead on strong arming in the worst possible way.
Yeah, I think you've basically taken my two questions that I had straight out of my mouth, because they were going to be implications for brand safety and risks to advertisers. So I think we've touched on that. Yeah. Unless there's anything else to add, and I feel we need to potentially move away from this topic before John actually has steam coming out of his ears.
We'll come back to him later, but let's move on before I have an aneurysm.
Okay. Let's move on to Apple. And we saw Apple and Meta facing EU fines under the Digital Marketers Act, potentially up to 10% of global ad revenue. A final decision, expected in April, remains undecided and subject to change. Could fines be enough to force Apple and Meta to comply with the EU's DMA, given the increased frostiness of US-EU regulations? Matt?
My initial thought to this was no. We've already seen in the past with many European and worldwide regulation, relatively modest fines in terms of the revenue that these companies generate, and it hasn't actually forced meaningful change. They keep on acting the way they are and violating these regulations. In terms of what the DMA has done, it's a case of actually that regulation has forced these platforms to make major changes when they haven't before. So in terms of Apple, obviously, they allowed third-party app stores, and that's a change we haven't seen. So on the one hand, it was just like, okay, the regulation has brought a positive change, but then you've seen in that Apple case, they've imposed really stringent, penalties on third-party app stores in terms of the costs these have to pay. They've got to have, I think it's €1 million in the bank before they even be accepted, which is just, you're adding extra hurdles in. So it's a case of almost two steps forward, and 1.99 back. It's just like, we're not really getting anywhere. And in terms of what's been quoted in Reuters in terms of why the EU is looking at imposing relatively modest fines, there's one element of that which I don't agree with, and it's that the case these regulations haven't been in law for a long time. And it's a case of, no, the law's the law. Say in the UK, in England and Wales, last year a law came out that made it illegal to abduct a domestic pet. Now, if I were to go outside right now and steal a dog, I would be put in prison. I would face the penalties outlined in that law. So in this case, the law is the law. It doesn't matter how long it's been a law, it's the law. So I don't see why, we can impose fines of up to 10%, but no, let's be kind to Apple. Apple is our friend. But obviously there's the whole US-EU relations going on in the background, which is, probably the more meaningful reason why that had, they're looking at imposing relatively modest fines. But yeah, don't say it's because it's only been law for a short amount of time. The law's the law.
John, you're shaking your head there in agreement.
Yeah, I'm the same as Matt. I have a slightly cynical view in that when it comes to fines, they're never going to be big enough because these companies just keep paying them. We saw them with the App Store situation with the dating apps in the Netherlands, where Apple were not allowing third-party apps and just kept paying the fine daily. I think they were given millions to pay and just kept doing it until they were finally ready to give concessions. But I do like seeing the DMA showing teeth. I am concerned for the new US-EU relationships, how they will continue to regulate and to kind of fine the big US companies who seem to think they've been given a license to run roughshod over EU rules. But we'll see how that plays out. And I would really like to see the DMA continue bearing teeth here and show that it's more than saber rattling, which I've often accused it of being. But yeah, everything's so up in the air with how the US is being run and its threats towards the EU at the moment that it's hard to envisage how things will play out over the next few months.
Yeah.
I guess just on these three stories that we've touched on, do you think we're witnessing the beginning of a global shift in how governments are regulating big tech?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a shift. I think it's an evolution. Obviously, we had GDPR. That was back in 2018, I think. And then, obviously, the main criticism of that is that it affected much smaller companies, while these big tech firms, while they were in some cases violating that, they were having extremely modest fines put upon them. So the DMA and DSA were efforts to bring that more into line and be like, actually, no, these big tech firms also have to, meet these regulations. So yeah, it's an evolution rather than a step change. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, yes, we have been quite critical of it so far, but equally, as the regulators find their feet, as the relations between the EU and the US become a bit clearer, maybe the teeth will eventually come out.
John, what do you think?
Yeah, agreed. It is changing and it is evolving. Hopefully that just the DMA stand firm. I'd hope that regulatory boards don't just all collapse and give in here to the major tech companies. And I hope it does not keep impacting small companies inversely than it does to the major big techs who, like I said, can afford to just keep paying fines until well, who knows when. But yeah, it's evolution rather than a complete rewriting of the rule book, I hope.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be more to chat about in Q2 on this, so let's watch this space. We saw French publishers and authors having filed a lawsuit against Meta, accusing the company of using their copyright works without permission to train its artificial intelligence models. Additionally, Meta has agreed to stop targeting a UK user with personalised ads and is considering offering a paid ad-free version of its platforms in the UK. What are the potential implications of the French lawsuit on Meta's AI training practices, John?
I mean, this opens up like the huge question from Q1, which is the role of AI, as well as the French lawsuit from publishers. We've seen the Make It Fair campaign from UK publishers, which saw a ad across all UK newspapers pretty much about the new copyright rules that the UK were planning to weaken to allow AI and large language models to use creative copyrighted work for training. The backlash has begun in Q1, and people are realizing that the value of their work and what these large language models need to be trained on, and they need to be compensated for it. There will be a shift, and I think this is just the start. There's actually a wonderful list on Press Gazette of who is litigating and who is licensing their content. So there's so many people in lawsuits against the AI companies, and there's an equal amount who have signed up with deals. The Guardian in Q1 were the latest to sign a deal with OpenAI for use of their content in return for special services from OpenAI in terms of how they use it, which is fascinating. Guardian are always good at getting ahead of this stuff in terms of making the most of the content that they have. But there's going to be a tipping point here. It's, musicians were involved in the Make It Fair campaign. Creators are involved. The UK government had actually said that maybe we'll protect the musicians, but we need journalism to be fair game. It's like, nope, people need funding for their words. They need compensation for what they've written. There's industries built on what their work is. There needs to be stronger governance here more than anything else. And it's, we are, the battle lines are really being drawn here. So I'm encouraged by the campaigns. I'm encouraged by any publisher who is working on it, particularly when you've got Sam Altman from OpenAI saying, oh no, if you don't let me have anything for free, then I won't be able to train my large language models. So that's no reason to allow and not be compensated for your own work. He keeps using geopolitics and the rise of China. It's like, oh no, we need to defend ourselves. I must be allowed access to this information. It's bollocks. And there's enough money flying around in the AI industry. There's enough funding going into it that licensing deals should be should be table stakes for getting publishers to be paid for their work across the creative industries.
Matt, do you have anything to add there on the potential implications?
I mean, what John said. Yeah. I absolutely tip my hat to these publishers for contesting, these big AI platforms. Just, copyright law is a thing. Why has it just been ignored and ripped up? And as John said, in the case of the UK government, like, oh yeah, no, they should be allowed to scrape your data. No, if I were to write an article, I would expect to be paid for that either through, direct from a company, through sponsorship revenue, for advertising revenue. There would be a payment model, which is why, if you're not licensing that direct from the publishers and giving them those direct benefits, then fuck off. You shouldn't be scraping their work. I'm very much encouraged by any publisher who pursues action against AI firms which aren't, licensing their work. And in terms of the future implications, I hope the courts come down hard on AI platforms if they're not, respecting copyright laws, respecting publishers, respecting creatives, and stealing their work, because that's what it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I don't want to come across as a Luddite here. Like, no. I am very appreciative of what AI can do. It is going to be transformative fundamentally for a lot of media businesses. But the issue at hand is like people being compensated properly and fully for work they have made, and it not being, it's not there to be free and to be sucked up and hoovered up by the machine. So it's something that will be done. AI is unstoppable. Its rise. It's not going to. There's no going back here. It's out the bottle fully. But people like aren't just creatives aren't just collateral damage for its growth. Publishers like need to get theirs basically.
And I think I really hope it also brings a bit more accountability to the models that AI platforms are using and the controls that publishers have to be able to go to these platforms. I think you've used some of my work, some of my data here. Please take it off your model, and for the AI models themselves to be able to go, yep, we've taken that off, rather than at the moment it's like, oh yeah, our models are so large and nebulous, I don't think we're able to do that. It's just a case of hopefully it brings that accountability into play as well.
Yep.
Yeah, more needs to be done and quickly.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. Well, I guess before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you both two questions. Looking back on Q1, Matt, who or what is the loser for you?
So to me, it's a what in this case, and that what is brand safety. Obviously, we've covered what Elon Musk is trying to do to brand safety and basically make advertisers pay even if they're not, putting their ads on a brand safe environment. Obviously, we've had the horrific findings in the latest analytics report. And at the same time, we've got, news publishers, trusted, verified news publishers with great journalism, trustworthy journalism, not being properly remunerated for their work. There was a study recently from Google that was, again, covered in Press Gazette, that they're basically saying news within the EU adds nothing to our bottom line. And it's just like, that is so backwards to me that these extremely brand safe environments, yes, obviously in terms of particular news stories, advertisers should have control over whether they feature against a particular news story, depending on their brand. But empirical findings time and time again prove that people trust news platforms and adverts placed against those news platforms. So for, these user-generated content platforms which have had zero controls, as X now is, for ad revenue to be still going there and not to these news publishers, I think brand safety is the loser here. I think there is hope. Obviously, we've got AI coming into the play, which is kind of reinvigorating the space and moving beyond, basic keyword lists as an example. So there is hope, but in terms of the stories we've seen in the first quarter, it hasn't been great for the field.
Yeah. And John, who's the loser for you, or what's the loser for you?
It's a who for me. I can bet you can guess who. We've had some lovely nuanced analysis there from Matt, and I'm going for Elon Musk as the loser.
Shocking.
I do not think that anyone's reputation has been affected so inversely by their exposure to the public as Elon Musk. He's gone from someone who people thought was an earth-saving genius with his Tesla and, like a kind of a benevolent Tony Stark tinkering in his tower trying to find the project to save the world, to his exposure through social media ultimately leading him to buy a social media platform, to influencing governments, and just becoming the world's villain. He's gleefully taking a chainsaw to public services. This lawsuit against advertisers, as I've previously mentioned on the podcast today, is baffling to me. And I think, he is taking glee in his role as the world's biggest troll. And it ties into what Matt said about brand safety and what I said previously about advertising on X. There are wonderful quality publishers out there for brands to spend money with, to deliver messages with, to buy space with, and for every penny that goes with a platform like X, it's just a shame, because they will call brand safety and they will say, we can, this is awful for us, we can get more reach from X. Like, no, just stop doing it. So yeah, Elon Musk is my loser of the quarter because of, I won't even get into his Roman salute that he's been making. But he's like, his reputation as a genius is taking an absolute battering the more the public get to see of him. And he's doing awful things for the media in the world. Thank you.
I don't think anyone's surprised with that answer, and
No.
I feel you could speak for hours on that topic.
I think we might do a podcast spec. Well, this one has basically been me ranting about Elon, but I might just do a little soliloquy
I
about.
regret not bringing in like a cardboard chainsaw and just running around. Now we've got the cameras on us. It's going chainsaw,
Chainsaw.
as he does. So.
He's a child. Anyway.
Okay, right. Let's change from the losers.
Shift on.
Winner, John. Who or what was your winner for Q1?
My winner, we haven't really touched on the CTV landscape and what's going on, but my winner is YouTube. It's, I think, a fragmented CTV landscape's developed and people are trying to get a foothold at the moment. No one's sure quite how the market's going to evolve, but YouTube has become like the constant story in terms of its success. And for me, I'm giving it the winner status because of how it's attracted major publishers and major broadcasters to use it to put their shows out for free, and the fact that they don't see it as a threat. I had the pleasure of being at a Channel 4 event a few weeks ago, and I asked them regarding the feeling of cannibalizing their own service by putting a whole series of Derry Girls on YouTube, and they said, no, you should see the results we're having. It has been very important to our growth to be off-platforming, and YouTube's at the heart of that. The debate over whether YouTube is TV seems to be closed by the fact that more people are watching it on the big screen than they are on their phones now. That it's a go-to on CTV platforms, and so it's the winner for me. YouTube is, we discuss with every person I talk to about CTV is, how do you feel about YouTube? Where does YouTube sit? But it's not just a threat to the streamers as well. It is a competition not just for Netflix and Amazon. It's a competition for gaming platforms. It is a competition for attention across the board. It's a competition for books, for magazines, for consoles, for TV, for radio, for music streaming. So yeah, it's not reluctantly, but YouTube for me just stands out as having a stellar first quarter.
Yeah, worthy winner for you.
Yeah.
And Matt, can you share your winner, please?
Yeah, so for me, my winner is AI. Obviously, we've talked about some of its many flaws in terms of what a lot of these models have been built on, but it does continue to see massive amounts of investment in terms of how it relates to the AdTech space itself. We've seen a lot of investments in platforms quoting AI, and we've recently seen the big pivot from Scope 3, which traditionally focused on carbon emissions. They're rolling out a whole suite of what they call AI agentics. So they obviously feel that, despite AI models in general having a higher carbon impact, they obviously are confident that they're able to offset increased emissions with emissions they're saving for advertisers in terms of that supply path optimization piece of making sure that ads aren't being spread out far and wide where they're not really going to be seen. And it's still an incredibly exciting and nascent field that, like I say, there needs to be some controls put in, don't get me wrong. But in terms of how it relates to the ad tech space, it can solve a lot of issues, obviously in terms of the loser in this quarter in terms of brand safety. I think it can have a real evolution there in terms of moving from the traditional keyword block lists to actual more semantic targeting, which can bring that appetite for brands to spend on more trustworthy publishers again, because it's not as if we've seen stories in the past where stories around the Football World Cup were blocked by some platforms because of the words shoot, when obviously in the context of football it's someone going for the goal rather than wielding a gun about. So AI can be hugely beneficial in terms of this, and obviously where we're having, in terms of the third-party cookie deprecation and obviously the move towards contextual, AI has a much more advanced contextual analysis capability than these basic keyword systems as an example. So there's lots of really exciting use cases for us as an industry. Yes, the controls need to be put in, but yeah, it's still incredibly exciting.
Amazing. Yeah, no, thank you. I think this is a nice way to wrap up on what went down in Q1. And let's see what pans out over the next 3 months, and we can no doubt recap in Q2. So yeah, I guess John, Matt, thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you very much for giving me the space to rant about Elon Musk for a few minutes. I'll be back at it next quarter, no doubt.
Yeah, thank you ever so much, Grainne. It's been great, and thanks for letting me go on weird tangents about stealing dogs.
Yeah,
and
please
other
don't do
No,
that.
I'm not planning on doing that. We have a cat. She wouldn't like a dog.
Yeah, and I guess thank you very much to everybody watching. And it's been great to film our first ExchangeWireTV episode, and that's it for the AdTech podcast.